elections. Now, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Yemi Cardoso, says the pump price of petrol will fall in 2024 because of the expected commencement of operation by government and private-owned refineries. Now, speaking at the launch of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group 2024 Macroeconomic Outlook Report in Lagos, Cardoso said the expected stabilization or reduction in fuel cost is poised to have far-reaching implications across various sectors, contributing significantly to overall economic efficiency and resilience. Cardoso at the forum also said Nigeria's currency is undervalued. Now, Johnson Chukwu is a financial analyst, founder and CEO of Cowry Asset Management Company Limited. He joins us now to discuss the CBN governor's projections on the price of petrol, the market fundamentals of petrol pricing, and weigh in on whether or not the Naira is undervalued. Many thanks for being with us here on Newsday. Very good afternoon to you. I'm just going to get straight into it. Now, let's begin with the petrol price. Some experts are saying that at the end of the day, crude is still being bought in dollars, and the ancillary costs that will be reduced by us refining locally are minimal, so we shouldn't anticipate a huge reduction in petrol price. Where does the reality lie?
Thank you for having me. I tend to agree with those who say that the dynamics of petroleum industry is such that crude is sold in dollar, and then ultimately, granted that Dangote Refinery, for instance, may be getting their feedstock from Nigeria, but they have to pay for it in dollars. But if they pay for it in dollars, they will also have to sell refined petroleum products in Nigeria in dollars. The option which also available to the country is that, assuming we are producing more crude than our current production, we can also give Dangote crude in Naira. So it will be like a crude swap, and then Dangote will give us product in Naira. But if that's not the case, then the crude price, the landing cost of refined petroleum product will marginally reduce, because we're going to save cost of insurance, cost of freight that is embedded in the export of crude and embedded in the import of refined petroleum product. Aside from that, the Dangote refinery will mark its product to international market prices, and simply means that we should expect material reduction in the price of refined petroleum product as a result of the operation of Dangote refinery.
Well, you just mentioned that the option which is available is if we're producing more crude, and we could have a crude swap, and the landing costs will marginally reduce. Is there a way to balance, like a middle ground in between these 2 points that you made? Is there a possibility of that happening?
Okay, let me throw more light to the second option I mentioned. If we produce more crude, and then we give to Dangote under our domestic crude obligation, and we are still able to export 1.4 million barrels a day, then we'll still be enjoying the level of import, foreign exchange earnings from our export, well as our import will reduce, which will mean import will reduce by about 30% or 35%, because petroleum products still now account for over 30% of our imports. So you're going to conserve that 30% or thereabout from your foreign exchange you spend on imports, and that will help us stabilize the exchange rate. Will also help us have a transmission effect on price levels once your exchange rate is stabilized. But if we do not have that increase in crude production, what happens is that we are going to swap what we're currently selling, exporting, and give to Dangote refinery. So if we continue to produce 1.3 million barrels, and we have to give a Dangote refinery 650,000 barrels a day, it then means we will just have about 800,000 barrels for export, which means our foreign exchange earning will reduce drastically, and we will not be able to meet our 70% import bill, which will see a further depreciation of the local currency. And so that's why I said the other option is if we have to produce more, but we have the capacity to produce additional 650,000 barrels a day, which means our production should get to about 2 million barrels a day. Is there a middle cost? The middle cost would be that you give part of what we currently produce to Dangote refinery, but whatever you produce is a zero-sum game. Whatever you give to Dangote refinery will be lost in terms of foreign export, and that will have a direct impact on foreign exchange earnings, which will give you net effect in terms of your reserve and the exchange rate.
And of course, on that note, as we're talking about impact on foreign exchange earnings and the value of the currency there, and what is the fair value of the naira, and is our optimism and excitement about Dangote refinery and Port Harcourt refinery coming on board, is our optimism and excitement misplaced when it comes to hoping that the naira will strengthen?
Yeah, I think it will be too much of optimism for anybody to actually logically expect naira will strengthen as a result of the coming on stream of these two refineries without a material increase in crude production, which I tried to explain earlier. It is that increase in crude production that will make sure that whatever we get to the refineries is net of what we currently export. I mean, it's aside from what we currently export. Yeah, that's when we enjoy that benefit of saving from these refineries in terms of our import bill. But the key thing about the value of the naira is that you can adopt an academic approach and say, look, purchasing power parity, if you do a purchasing power parity, what is the value of the naira? But what matters most is on the streets, what price are you getting the dollar? And as it stands today, we've seen a constant depreciation of local currency due to a couple of factors. One, we're not earning enough foreign exchange earning from our exports. Two, we're not getting much significant inflow from foreign direct investors and foreign portfolio investors. And three, we're not likely going to see a material change in our home domestic remittances from Nigerians in diaspora, these are the three major components of our foreign exchange earnings that will help us stabilize the exchange rate. If we don't have a stability in the exchange rate or improved flow of foreign currency into the economy, then when we talk of naira being overvalued, it's pure academic. Because whatever method you use to value the currency, what matters is what obtains on the streets. And that what obtains on the street is based on the interplay of demand and supply. The central bank does not have the war chest to support the intervening market sufficiently to bring down the price of dollar. And as long as it doesn't have that, clearly the market rules, the market prices are reflective of the valuation of the currency. So I don't think anybody should say naira is overvalued when the realities on the ground are to the contrary. Because on the street, will you get naira at anything below, dollar at anything below what you currently obtains on the street? The answer is no. So if you use purchasing power parity and say what is the price of Coke compared to the price of Coke in the US, what is the price of a bottle of beer, and then what is the price of a crate of egg? At the end of the day, it doesn't really work that way. What matters is the reality on the ground. And that reality on the ground is a reflection of the price at which we are buying dollar. And that, for me, is the ruling price of the value of the currency.
Well, based on the points that you've made, talking about the realities on ground and whatnot, and the other factors that you say must be addressed if we're going to see this happen, do you foresee the predictions of the CBN governor materializing at a certain time eventually, if the realities do change? Is there a timeline that you're comfortable placing for this?
Well, I wouldn't place a timeline to it, but whether those predictions are achievable in the long run, yes. In the medium term, they are optimistic predictions. In the long run, I believe we get the policy right, but we'll fix the economy. The economy shouldn't remain the way it is today. We should be able to do a few things right and then get the exchange stabilized. One of those things that, if I mentioned repeatedly, if we increase crude production, we should see the naira stabilize in the next, in the medium term. Should we assess long-term funding that does not require immediate payment for the next 5 years? We should be able to use that to clear the arrears of unmet demand and help the currency stabilize in the medium term. But ultimately, if we improve productive activities, then we should expect that the economy will export more commodities to the global community and earn more foreign exchange, and the currency will stabilize. Naira could actually begin to appreciate, but those are in the medium to long term. And that time frame is all dependent on the policy mix of the government and how those things fit into the reality of the ground.
Right, and speaking of policy mix, one of the conversations at the moment is around inflation targeting and seeing inflation being brought down to 21.4%. What are your thoughts on this, especially with a focus on ensuring that agricultural productivity is enhanced and again, another optimistic outlook that global supply pressures will ease? Is this the right attitude towards tackling our problems, especially when we were expecting to see some monetary policy tightening?
Okay, let me start from the target that the CBN governor has indicated, which was also captured in the budget, 2024 budget, of 21.4%. I believe that we're going to see some level of moderation in inflation in the current year, particularly towards the end of the fiscal year. And because of principally base effect. The base effect because you're measuring inflation from the previous year's level. So if by the time you get to December this year, and remember the inflation rate in December this year was 28.92%. So inflation rate in December this year will be, December last year was 28.92%. So the basis of measuring inflation this year will be on the current price levels. So if, for instance, the bag of rice in December 2023 was 600 naira, and in December 2024 it becomes 660 naira, it simply means you have had a 10% inflation rate on rice. So because of higher level of prices that we're currently suffering, additional increment in prices may not be as material or as significant as the increases we saw in 2023. For instance, we saw a devaluation of the currency, the devaluation of the currency. We're not likely going to see that level of devaluation in 2024, which means in as much as prices will continue to increase in 2024, they are not likely going to increase at the same magnitude that they increased in 2023. So you are going to see a moderation in inflation, not that inflation will not remain high. Whether that moderation will be at 21, get to a point where we have 21.4%, I can't say categorically. But what I can only talk on is the factor that will drive that inflation. He directly pointed out if we see a material increase in the food production level, it will drive down inflation because food inflation was at 33.93% in December. So if you see a material increase in inflation in food production, that should bring down inflation because food inflation also accounts for more than 50% of the basket of commodities that are used to measure inflation in the country. Bear in mind that the problem we have with food production is insecurity. So I want the fiscal authority to speak to us on what they want to do to arrest the level of insecurity in the country. We're still dealing with major flare-up in the north central. We're still dealing with bandits in the northeast. And we're still dealing with Boko Haram and other non-state actors in the northeast. So until you address the issue of insecurity in these food beds of the country, you are not likely going to see material improvement in food production. Without material improvement in food production, it will rather be too optimistic for anybody to expect a material reduction in food inflation.
Right. Well, I suppose we do proceed with cautious optimism then. Johnson Chukwu, CEO and founder of Cowry Asset Management, we thank you so much for that very robust analysis.